We grow up fearing monsters. They hide under our beds, lurk in the woods, cast spells in towers. But what if the most terrifying monster is not out there? What if it's within us? Fairy tales have long whispered secrets we were never taught to hear. Behind the dragons and witches, beyond the curses and dark forests, there is a quiet truth waiting to be seen. The villain in the story often carries a piece of our soul we've refused to recognize. Marie-Louise von Franz, building on Jung's insights, saw fairy tales not as fantasies, but as maps of the inner world. To her, the antagonists, the ogre, the wicked stepmother, the sorcerer, are not just threats to the hero. They are symbolic expressions of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we hide, reject, or bury. But why do we do that? Why do we exile certain traits, anger, envy, greed, lust, fear, and pretend they don't belong to us? Because we're taught early on that to be loved, we must be good. So we cut away what doesn't fit. We wear a mask. And the rest? It becomes a monster in the tale. When you hear the story of the cruel witch, the jealous queen, the savage beast, pause. Ask yourself, what part of me am I not willing to face? This isn't about guilt or shame. It's about honesty. The shadow isn't evil. It's just unlived. And when we ignore it, it controls us from the dark. But when we name it, feel it, integrate it, it becomes power, compassion, clarity. So this is not a journey into fairy tales for children. It's a descent into the forest of the soul, where every villain wears your face, where the sword is awareness, and the treasure is wholeness. The monster is you. But that doesn't have to be frightening. It can be the beginning of freedom. We all like to think of ourselves as good people. We smile when expected, help when we can, and do our best to be kind. But beneath that polished surface, there is something else. A darker presence, quiet but persistent, that follows us wherever we go. Carl Jung called it the shadow. It's not a demon. It's not a flaw. It's simply the part of you that you refuse to see. The shadow is everything you didn't want to be. Every impulse you denied. Every feeling you pushed away. Every trait you were told not to have. It holds your anger, your jealousy, your pride, your fear, your ambition, your sensuality. But it also holds your strength. And that's what makes it dangerous, because what is denied doesn't disappear. It waits. And when ignored too long, it begins to act without your permission. You snap at someone you love. You sabotage a good opportunity. You fall into patterns you promised to escape. That's not weakness. That's the shadow knocking on the door. Jung believed that to become whole, we must confront this inner stranger, not to destroy it, but to understand it, to integrate it. And it was Marie-Louise von Franz, his close collaborator, who brought this concept to life through fairy tales. To her, stories were not entertainment. They were psychic blueprints, ancient dreams of the collective soul. And in those dreams, the shadow appears again and again. The evil queen, the wicked stepmother, the jealous brother, the cunning trickster. They are not just obstacles for the hero. They are expressions of the hero's inner conflict. The tale shows us what we're unwilling to admit, that the greatest battle is not with the dragon, but with ourselves. Von Franz understood that these characters aren't there to be hated. They're there to be seen. They invite us to recognize our hidden selves without shame, without fear. Because when we do, something profound happens. We begin to reclaim the pieces we've lost. The anger that becomes courage, the envy that points to desire, the fear that guards wisdom. The shadow becomes a teacher. But it's not an easy teacher. It asks for honesty. It asks for humility. It asks for the courage to sit with your own darkness and not turn away. And this is where the fairy tale becomes real, because each of us is walking our own myth. Each of us has a forest to cross, a mirror to face, a monster to meet. And if we dare to look closely, that monster might begin to change. It might not vanish, but it will no longer control us. It becomes part of the story, part of you. This is the work of the soul. This is what Jung and von Franz pointed us toward. Not perfection, but wholeness. Not light without shadow, but the union of both. She appears hunched, with wild hair, a crooked smile, and eyes that pierce through illusion. The witch, the old sorceress, the woman alone in the woods, feared and despised, accused of things no one dares to name. But who is she, really? Fairy tales have long cast her as the villain. She poisons, curses, seduces, deceives. She is dangerous, unpredictable, and often wise. And that perhaps is the real reason she's feared. Marie-Louise von Franz saw the witch not just as a symbol of evil, but as a figure carrying the weight of the repressed feminine. The emotional, instinctual, intuitive power that society so often silences. This isn't about gender, it's about psychic energy. The feminine, in Jungian terms, represents receptivity, depth, connection with nature, the realm of the soul. But when these qualities are dismissed, mocked, or suppressed, they don't disappear. They fester. They become distorted. And eventually, they return with rage. The witch is that return. She represents what happens when feeling is denied, when tenderness is punished, when a woman's power is stripped from her and turned into something monstrous. Why is she old? Because we've forgotten her. Because we've buried ancient feminine wisdom beneath layers of rationality, control, and fear. And yet, she keeps showing up in our stories, because some part of us knows we need her. The old sorceress stands at the threshold between worlds. She knows how to heal, how to harm, how to guide, and how to test. She can be cruel, yes, but more often she is misunderstood. Look closer, and you'll see. She often holds the key, the secret herb, the hidden truth, the question no one else dares to ask. And isn't that exactly what we reject in ourselves? The part that sees too much, that feels too deeply, that knows what can't be explained. We've been taught to fear the irrational, the emotional, the mysterious, to keep it locked away, to stay safe. But the stories whisper another truth, that the witch is not meant to be destroyed. She is meant to be faced. Because when we deny her, we deny our own depth, our own intuition, our own capacity to transform. The fury of the rejected feminine is not senseless. It's the cry of the soul longing to be heard. To meet the witch is to meet your own forgotten wisdom, the grief you've silenced, the power you've buried, the voice that trembles in your chest but refuses to die. And if you listen, really listen, she might no longer curse you. She might just lead you home. They stomp through the pages of fairy tales, massive and brutal. Ogres who devour children, trolls who guard bridges, giants who crush bones and hoard treasures in the mountains. We meet them early in life, these monsters of brute force, and learn to run. But what if they're not meant to be escaped? What if these terrifying figures aren't just obstacles, but mirrors? In Jungian psychology, and especially in the interpretations of Marie-Louise von Franz, these figures symbolize a raw, instinctive power buried deep within the psyche. Not refined, not conscious, but essential. They represent energy we often suppress: rage, hunger, desire, aggression, survival. They frighten us because they are untamed. But beneath their violence lies something ancient, a force that can either destroy or protect, depending on how we relate to it. Think of the ogre who lives alone, outside the village, feared by all. He's ugly, uncivilized. He doesn't speak the language of society, and yet he survives. He knows the forest, the mountain, the terrain of the unconscious. His strength is animal, instinctual. It resists control, and maybe that's exactly why we need him. Too often, we're taught to be polite, to behave, to stay small. We're told to hide our anger, dim our light, keep our voice soft. But the psyche has no interest in being socially acceptable. It wants to be whole, and wholeness includes the ogre, that part of you that roars when you've had enough, that says no with your whole body, that protects your boundaries, your dignity, your soul. These monstrous figures show up in fairy tales as guardians of treasure, not by accident, because sometimes your greatest treasure is buried beneath the part of you you're most afraid to feel. Your courage, your wildness, your fire. Yes, the giant can crush you, but he can also carry you. The troll may block your path, but he asks the question no one else will. The ogre might terrify you until you realize he's the only one willing to stand between you and what wants to consume you. To fear these figures is human, but to approach them with curiosity is the beginning of transformation. You don't need to become a giant, but you need to know there's one inside you. Not to dominate others, but to stop letting yourself be dominated. To claim your space, to stand your ground, to protect what matters. Because sometimes the part of you that growls and breaks things is the same part that keeps you alive. And maybe, just maybe, it's not a monster at all. Maybe it's the strength you've been waiting to meet. Every story needs a villain, someone to oppose the hero, someone to create conflict, someone to blame. We love to hate them. They make our heroes shine brighter. Their cruelty, their pride, their twisted logic, so unlike us, or so we like to believe. But fairy tales, as Marie-Louise von France reminds us, are not written for comfort. They are written to reveal. And the villain? He is not the enemy. He is the mirror. A distorted mirror, yes, but still a reflection. What we fear in villains is often what we refuse to face in ourselves. Their greed mirrors our hidden hunger. Their cruelty reflects the coldness we try to deny. Their ambition, though exaggerated, echoes desires we've buried under shame. We tell ourselves, I could never be like that. But the psyche is not so simple. In dreams, in slips of the tongue, in quiet moments of honesty, something whispers, yes, you could. And that whisper is not an accusation, it's an invitation. Because what we reject, we project. We place outside of us what we cannot tolerate inside. And fairy tales hold that projection up to our eyes, over and over again, asking us to look again. The villain is not there to be destroyed. He is there to be understood. He carries the shadow of the hero. He represents the very qualities the hero must confront, not just in battle, but within. That's why so many fairy tale endings feel incomplete when the villain simply vanishes. Because the real victory isn't external, it's internal. When the hero integrates what the villain represents, courage without cruelty, strength without domination, desire without obsession, something changes, not just in the story, in the soul. Von Franz saw this clearly. The antagonist is not a mistake in the tale. He is a necessity. Without him, there is no transformation, no tension, no truth. To confront the villain is to confront the parts of yourself that frighten you. The liar, the manipulator, the one who envies, who controls, who destroys. Not to become them, but to recognize them, to take responsibility for them, to find the gold hidden in their darkness. Because inside every villain, there is a lesson. And once you've learned it, once you've faced what you feared most in yourself, the villain no longer controls you. He becomes part of you, not as an enemy, but as a guide. Fairy tales are not fantasies. They are maps of integration. And the villain is not your downfall. He is the beginning of your awakening. Every fairy tale begins with a call. A prince must slay a dragon. A girl must face the dark woods. A wanderer must leave the village and descend into the unknown. We think we know what makes them heroes: courage, kindness, virtue. But what if the real measure of a hero isn't how pure they are, but how deeply they're willing to face their own darkness? The shadow is not just the villain outside, it is the struggle within. And without it, there is no true hero's journey. Marie-Louise von France taught us that the path of transformation is never clean. The hero must meet the parts of themselves they've hidden, the fear they won't admit, the desire they're ashamed of, the rage they try to bury. And here's the paradox. It is precisely this confrontation that awakens real strength. The knight who defeats the dragon hasn't just conquered a beast. He's faced the fire of his own instincts. The princess who endures the trial of thorns hasn't just survived pain. She's made peace with her inner wounds. Their victory is not perfection. It is integration. Because to be heroic doesn't mean to be flawless. It means to be whole. Without the shadow, the hero remains naive, too kind to say no, too afraid to act, too distant from their own truth. But when they walk into the cave, when they face the witch, the wolf, the mirror, they reclaim the parts of themselves they once feared. And something changes. The courage becomes deeper. The kindness becomes wiser. The strength becomes real. The journey isn't about killing the darkness. It's about allowing it to speak, to teach, to transform. Fairy tales knew this long before psychology did. They show us what we've always felt, but never named, that your power doesn't come from avoiding the shadow. It comes from holding its hand and walking forward anyway. Only then does the hero truly rise. Have you ever found yourself in the same emotional place again and again? Different faces, different moments, but the same ache, the same argument, the same self-doubt, the same fear, returning like an old friend you never invited. It feels like a loop, like something inside you refuses to move forward, no matter how much you learn or try. And that's not because you're broken. It's because the story isn't finished. Marie-Louise von France, deeply rooted in Jung's teachings, saw this repetition not as failure, but as the soul's persistence. The unconscious doesn't give up when we ignore it. It simply finds new ways to speak, new faces to project onto, new situations that press the same bruises. These conflicts we repeat are not accidents. They are symbols. And until they are seen, heard, and integrated, they will circle back. Just like in fairy tales. The princess pricks her finger no matter how many warnings. The hero keeps getting lost in the forest. The spell is never broken on the first try. That's because the transformation doesn't happen with effort alone. It happens with understanding. When you meet the same inner battle over and over, ask yourself, what part of me is still waiting to be accepted? What truth have I not yet had the courage to face? Often, we repeat because we want a different outcome, without changing who we are inside. But fairy tales teach us that the outer world only shifts when the inner world does. When we stop running, when we stop blaming, when we sit with the discomfort long enough to hear what it's really trying to say. The witch may return, the forest may grow dark again, but each time we are not the same. Each encounter holds the chance for a deeper response, a new choice, a movement toward wholeness. So if you're caught in the same old pattern, don't rush to escape. Ask what it wants from you, because the story only repeats until you become the person who no longer needs to hear it. For so long, we've been taught that the dark parts of ourselves are to be feared, hidden, or destroyed. The shadow, the parts labeled ugly, dangerous, or wrong, has been pushed deep into the corners of our minds, locked away from the light of day. But what if the real path to freedom isn't through elimination, but through integration? Marie-Louise von France, following Jung's profound wisdom, invites us to rethink everything we thought we knew about darkness. She shows us that the shadow isn't our enemy. It's a vital piece of our wholeness, a guardian of hidden treasures. When we try to eliminate the shadow, whether it shows up as anger, envy, fear, or desire, we do more harm than good, because these parts don't simply disappear. They gather strength in silence, growing restless and wild, like a forest fire burning unseen beneath the snow, waiting for the moment to erupt. To truly live, we must stop waging war on ourselves. We must stop believing that some parts are bad and others good. Instead, we must welcome the shadow as a teacher. We must listen when it whispers what we need to learn. We must hold its hand without judgment or shame. This is no easy task. It demands courage, the courage to sit with discomfort, to face fears we've long avoided, and to embrace what we thought was unlovable. But this courage births something extraordinary: authenticity. When the shadow is integrated, it transforms. The anger becomes the voice of boundaries. The envy turns into motivation. The fear opens doors to wisdom. The darkness becomes a wellspring of creativity and strength. Fairy tales have always known this secret. The villain isn't defeated by sword alone. The witch isn't banished by fire. Instead, they must be met, understood, and made part of the hero's journey. Because the soul's quest is not to erase its shadows, but to dance with them, to find balance between light and dark, to become whole. So ask yourself, who is the shadow in your story? What parts have you been running from? And what might happen if, instead of fighting, you invited them in? If you allowed yourself to be whole, not perfect, but real? That is the deepest alchemy of transformation. Not elimination, but integration. Not denial, but acceptance. Not fear, but love. And in that love, your story begins again. Not as a victim of darkness, but as a master of your own soul. If this journey into the shadow has stirred something in you, if you've seen even a glimpse of yourself in these ancient tales, then don't walk this path alone. Subscribe to the channel and be part of a growing circle of souls ready to face the depths. Leave a comment. Tell us which shadow spoke to you the loudest. And if this message resonated, share it with someone who might be searching for their own light in the dark. Because the more we understand our inner stories, the more human and whole we become.